hello again. Thank you so much for joining us here at WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. And where before we even get started, I want to give a quick special shout out to our dear friends at Patriot Depot. Thank you, Patriot Depot, for sponsoring today's show. Make sure to check out patriotdepot.com. And as you can see right there, you can use the code WJ Live, get 20% off store-wide. And so, yeah, Patriot Depot, where they will be supplying the conservative revolution. I can't remember words right now.
Nice job.
Thank you so much for joining us, guys. We have a lot to get to today. We are talking about everything from Satan shoes to, I guess, unlimited.
You led with the Satan shoes thing, didn't you? Yeah.
Satan shoes, unlimited stimulation, and whatever it is that Andrew wants to talk about today. So, my name is Brian Chai. I am the Deputy Managing Editor here at the Western Journal. To my left is Joe Sedian, also Deputy Managing Editor, and to my right, Andrew Shasha, who I don't know what you are right now.
Supervising editor now.
Supervising editor. Oh, snap. The things that happen when I'm on paternity. All right, guys. So, yeah, let's go ahead and get started. I think the first thing we're going to talk about today, Andrew, you wanted to bring up some lovely media.
Yeah. Today I wanted to talk about Glenn Greenwald and the curious case of the establishment media's eggshell skull. And so we have a very famous reporter, this Glenn Greenwald, for those who aren't familiar. He is now working on his own, covering things as he sees fit, but has been involved in quite a few major stories over the last couple of decades, particularly Edward Snowden. This is the writer who broke Edward Snowden's big reveal, essentially, about the NSA spying on American citizens and
the NSA
tapping
spies on American
metadata, in case anyone had forgotten about that major development, which it seems we do every day. That this reporter had essentially seen that at USA Today, an intern had worked with a team of reporters to churn out her first report, and she bragged about it on Twitter. She wrote, "My first story with USA Today, defendants in the January 6th Capitol riot continue to crowdfund their legal fees online using popular payment processors despite a growing crackdown from tech companies." And so essentially, USA Today did this deep dive, and they found that a bunch of the folks who were arrested and will be or have been charged and will face a jury of their own peers or a judge with regard to rioting on the Capitol on January 6th. Again, horrible event. They have been crowdfunding their legal fees. Essentially, if they can't afford a better defense attorney than the state has provided them, they have been crowdfunding a better defense, which is something that we've seen a lot of folks do, particularly at the height of the BLM protests last year. Amid the rioting and the arrests, we saw quite a few folks doing that. We saw prominent politicians like Kamala Harris actually forwarding some of those legal defense funds to kind of be helping out those folks who had been arrested rioting. And so now we have seen folks on the left in the establishment media start to say that it might be dangerous that these crowdfunding websites are allowing right-wing bigots and far-right, far-right rioters to be crowdfunding their defense. And so Glenn Greenwald, who for a modern liberal is one of the most level-headed modern liberals there is, wrote, "Congratulations on using your new journalistic platform to try to pressure tech companies to terminate the ability of impoverished criminal defendants to raise money for their legal defense from online donations. You're well on your way upward in this industry for sure." So he's essentially saying there's no doubt that USA Today had a political motive in this. They're bringing this to light, and they're highlighting that, quote, crackdown from tech companies in hopes that maybe crowdfunding websites like GoFundMe will say, maybe we shouldn't have these far-right folks on our platform funding their defense. And he says essentially that the left pointing to these things in hopes that groups will get canceled, individuals will get canceled, and be unable to fund their defense is a dangerous thing. Now, this individual happens to have been an intern at USA Today. She's one of the younger writers. This was her first article again. And so out of the woodwork came the typical establishment media miscreants on the left, saying that he had taken things way too far to even point out this kind of very clear left-wing move to push against folks crowdfunding their defense. And they came out, they called him, a sexist. They said that they were trying to ruin her career before it even got off the ground. They attacked him, left, right, and center. And he essentially wrote back 8 hours ago, "This is a dirty little game journalists at major newspapers like USA Today play. They use their huge platform to attack and try to ruin the lives of powerless people and private citizens, then depict themselves as the fragile victims, the bullied, to bar any criticisms from themselves." And so what I wanted to get at from you guys today is, does the media have an eggshell skull? Are they incapable of taking criticism? What happened to the days when journalists, when I was, growing up and I was looking to be a journalist and write about politics? Yeah, of course, not very long ago. But I looked to history at writers who, they wanted to get jostled for a story. They wanted to get out there, and if they were willing to fight for that scoop, that's completely gone to the point where they can't even take being highlighted by a bigger reporter and that reporter saying this isn't good. I mean, do they have an eggshell skull? Are they incapable of taking criticism?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the media they've taken the idea of a free press, which is one of the cornerstones of the American Democratic Republic, our system that we have. They've taken that, but they've made that mean thou shalt not criticize the media as well. And there's a big difference, right? For one thing, there's a big difference between the government criticizing the media, which I think is very, very dangerous, and I do not like that, and private citizens criticizing the media. Now, look, if your report's good, then it should withhold criticism. If it's not good, then maybe there's a reason that people are criticizing it. But part of this bedrock of the free press is that you can print whatever you want, and you have a lot of leeway in terms of not getting sued for defamation or not getting sued for whatever, and anyone has the right to criticize it as much as you want. That's kind of what you take on when you say, I'm going to publish something. When this intern said, I'm going to throw myself into the public and publish this story, you're opening yourself up to criticism. And you have to realize that as a journalist, you have to be, willing to take the heat. And obviously, I think that things such as, harassment, when you're harassing journalists, that's not good. I haven't seen a whole lot of that in this instance. I'm sure there are some trolls out there, as there always are, and those people ought to be condemned. But simply criticizing the work that somebody does is not out of bounds. When did that become out of bounds?
Yeah, I actually think it's sort of this self-perpetuating cycle where the media, I think it's fair to say right now, the establishment media has probably the worst relationship with its audience that it's had in many, many years, as far as fake news, people, misinformation campaigns, all that stuff. So between that issue and then the sort of never being able to admit when they've made a mistake, I think those actually go hand in hand. When public sentiment is so low, you frankly can't afford to admit mistakes. You have to spin the narrative that you were right. Whoever on Twitter is blasting you and pointing out your flaws, that person's wrong or is just a troll. But yeah, it does feel like this self-fulfilling prophecy where and the thing is, they keep doing kind of shadier and shadier things to kind of get that narrative, and the shadier things you do, the more chance of having to issue a correction. So yeah, it does feel like just this vicious cycle that I don't really see an end to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, what you pointed out, Brian, this idea that they have a terrible relationship with the audience, that's a fact. Axios has been printing stories for the last year and a half now with important header graphs that show that media trust has taken a dive in recent years to historic lows. Below 50% of individuals polled say that they trust the national media and the traditional media. That's a huge problem. And this idea that they're unwilling to accept criticism for their work can only hurt them. It's this idea that, oh, well, you don't trust us? Well, if you don't trust us, you're part of the enemy of the state that we're trying to kind of shine a light on here. You are part of that right-wing machine. Unfortunately, I mean, Joe, what you were saying, I think that's the case. This idea that you shouldn't take criticism, no, it's the same idea that has kind of defended folks like David Hogg. He's young, so it's not fair that you criticize him or attack him. And it's like, well, he has stepped into the public sphere. Right. Now, that doesn't mean, like Joe said, that harassment and threats are ever okay. Absolutely not. But the idea that you're immune to criticism because you're younger, because you are female, because you are a new reporter, it's ridiculous. When you step in,
You don't just get mulligans. Oh well, you're a new reporter, so we'll lay off you for your first couple articles.
Exactly.
That's just not how this works.
And a good criticism goes after the work. If the work is wrong or if the work is politically motivated, that's where the criticism goes. It's not like Glenn Greenwald came out and said, "Oh well, this bratty 6-year-old is writing these things that I don't like." He came out and said, "This is clearly politically motivated." And it gets at the heart of this issue, which is that the establishment media has for a very long time wanted to act as a political actor and receive the praise and support and aggrandizement that comes with being an unbiased entity. And that is a huge concern.
Yeah, you can't have it both ways, right? You can't be the person, the mainstay that everyone looks up to, the neutral Walter Cronkite, right? Thing, and you can't garner that kind of respect, but also then be an activist reporter kind of with your own agenda, all that stuff. It can't have your cake and eat it too.
No. And it gets at another heart of this issue is that you're getting to a place where now the media can't actually call out the real problematic actor, which is the government. The government aggregating more power for itself every day, doing more and more dangerous work, and just growing the grounds upon which it operates. And instead of speaking truth to power in government, they're speaking truth to power in what the far right oppressor, 60-year-old man who got caught on the grounds of the Capitol. Absolutely a bad behavior and absolutely should be punished. But come on, this isn't the truth to power that you're supposed to be speaking.
Everyone, I mean, it is unrelated probably because it's not what the content doesn't matter. I think as much as the principle of that we should be able to criticize the media, but everyone deserves a defense, right? I don't care if you are the worst person in the world. There's nothing to you deserve a good lawyer. I think. That's in the Constitution. You have the right to the public defender, and unfortunately, the public defender system in this country is very, very bad. So I can understand why people want a decent lawyer. I think that's very fair. I don't care how bad the crime you've committed is. You should be able to have a lawyer who can defend you.
Yeah, and it's a new low to stoop low enough to try to take that away from someone, to try to screw them with the bottom of the barrel when you can. Another new low is constant government stimulation. Right. As you said earlier.
Good segue.
Yeah, and it is. It's probably the most dangerous type of low you can have because it feels good when you get a bunch of money in your debit account. But I think the future ramifications of this, even us, armchair economists, even we are aware that this money doesn't just come out of nowhere.
It does.
They do.
I mean, at this point,
it does. It does. But I mean, it will eventually have to be.
Yeah, at some point, the bubble bursts. Right.
Yes.
At some point, you realize, if you're just printing money, then why is it worth anything in the first place?
Exactly.
And that's not to say that socialism is correct and that money's worth nothing. Money is worth something, and we should treat it like it's worth something.
Absolutely, but there are 64 federal legislators who want to keep treating money as if it's nothing. Surprise, surprise, they are all Democrats, representatives and senators. And they have basically come out kind of over the weekend. I mean, this has been bubbling for a while, this general topic. But a letter signed by many said legislators, spearheaded probably one of the more famous names to have signed that letter is Ilhan Omar, who, if you've ever read the Western Journal, I'm sure you've heard of her. And essentially, the Democrats are arguing that there should be an indefinite stimulus program. So essentially, people are going to be getting free money indefinitely. And this idea just really kind of when I first heard about this, I actually thought it was a joke because it just seems so stupid on its face, just for lack of a better term. Joe, I'll go and start with you. What's the game plan from Democrats here? Because this is all 64 federal legislators are Democrats. They are the ones heavily pushing, essentially, recurring stimulus payments.
Yeah, I think the game plan there is to basically I mean, it's always to build dependence on the government, right? That being said, I think what they don't realize is that there's something to be said for, okay, if you're going to get rid of welfare payments, if you're going to get rid of a lot of government programs, give people a check instead, right? And there's an argument to be made for that. People know how to spend their money better than the government does. But that's not what they're doing here, right? They're not saying, well, let's get rid of this program, this program, this program, and give it to people instead. They want to throw it on top of the things that people already have. And look, if I'm to act very generously toward their motivations, right? They feel bad for many people who are struggling, right? And I feel bad for those people too. And maybe they think that the best way for them to get back on their feet is to have, recurring government payments. We know that's not the case. We know that, being dependent on the government for everything will not help you get out of poverty. That you should be encouraged to work, all that stuff. But let's say their motivations are good. They're just wrong.
But
I don't know how they don't see that.
And in this instance, the Democratic Party is the abusive boyfriend that brings home flowers. They're the ones that beat the nation into submission over COVID, and now they're going to bring home flowers, and they're going to say, see, we still love you. We still want you to be supported and taken care of, but they're the ones that gave the bruises for the last year. It doesn't make sense to kind of support their responsive initiative to kind of solve the problem that they created.
Yeah, and I also want to say that, like, if we were going to do this, it should have. If we were going to do recurring payments, and I'm not saying we should have. It should have been done, at the beginning of the pandemic, not now. When we're, realistically probably weeks away, God willing, from the pandemic being over.
Yeah, and to make it, even worse. This should come as little surprise to anyone, but Democrats did make this infinite stimulation about race. Here's a quote from that letter that I said a bunch of legislators signed. Worsening systemic inequities such as food insecurity and housing instability are most severe for Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities who are suffering higher infection and mortality rates of COVID-19 and higher unemployment levels compared to white Americans. You will note there that there is no mention of Asians, so I'm not sure. I don't think Asians fall under indigenous.
No, well, they're correct, right? I mean, the African Americans and a lot of minorities have been harder hit by the pandemic. They have been harder hit, both in terms of just economics and in terms of the actual health stuff. But their solution is all wrong. It's not going to help these communities get back on their feet. It's going to make things worse.
Yeah, it's the old teach a man to fish.
Yeah.
That whole adage. All right, Andrew, the last thing I kind of want to touch on this is sort of like a bigger picture thing here. Where does the buck stop as far as who are going to be the fiscally responsible adults in government when we literally have legislators who think that just giving people money for the rest of time is a good use of resources?
Well,
who will be that adult?
Allow me to play the pessimist and say nobody.
No, boy.
There is not a single party, there is not a single player right now on the national stage that has kept the promise of we're going to spend less money.
There are very few.
There are very few players, and they get kicked out by the establishment every chance that the establishment gets. I mean, this idea that it's the extension of modern monetary theory, the idea that debt doesn't matter. Debt might as well be good. It's good for nations to be working in trade with one another and spending money and printing money. It's just better for the economy to have constant flow. And it's essentially the idea of a business that operates on only cash. Well, if cash is coming in and cash is going out, what gets lost doesn't really matter. Yeah. And that makes for a huge mess. And when there isn't an adult in the room to say, this is where the buck stops, we're done spending on all these ridiculous programs. When that never comes, because as Joe has said on the show in the past, once you've given a right or once you've given a gift, you can't take it back. Yeah. Reasonably speaking, nobody likes that. Nobody wants to be the adult that plays bad cop. It's an endless cycle. And I think unfortunately, we got on that cycle in the 50s with FDR. Reagan exacerbated it for, all the support that he gets. I support President Ronald Reagan. I understand why people admire him. But a president who exacerbated that problem, and it has persisted into the last 20 years.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a reason that we haven't reformed Social Security or Medicare yet, or any of these entitlements, because taking things away is a lot easier said than done. You know, one thing I want to add to that, Andrew, you said, nobody is talking about, no serious national players. There are a few, right? I'll bring up Representative Thomas Massey, the libertarian-leaning Republican from
favorites.
Kentucky, who said last year, remember the CARES Act?
Yep.
Was it the CARES Act? I think that's what it was called. Yeah. When that $2.2 trillion bill was about to become law, and he wanted to force members of Congress to come and vote on it in person, right? And you'll remember that Democrats said he was the worst, and Republicans, President Trump, I believe, either said he should be primaried or that he should be thrown out of the Republican Party.
Yes.
So, and look, he was right. I mean, look, $6 trillion later, and we're spending, and there's no end in sight, really.
Nope.
And no one seems to care. Republicans don't care. Democrats don't care. Republicans will pretend to care, but they don't. This is a huge issue. It's not just Democrats doing their ridiculous things, which they're doing. It's Republicans. Republicans don't care, and when you speak out against it, they threaten to throw you out of the party.
Yeah.
So it's a big issue, and it bothers me.
They care as long as it enables them to be in control of the purse strings next election cycle.
Yeah.
And that's as far as they care.
And while Republicans may not care about our rapidly ballooning national debt, they do happen to care about shoes that are basically tailor-made for Satan. And I know Joe wants to talk about Satan's shoes today.
I want to talk a little bit about Lil Nas X. And he's a famous rapper. I'm honestly not terribly familiar with him. I'm not the biggest rap fan in the world.
The Old Town Road,
Yeah,
if you've ever heard.
Old Town Road.
Old Town Road.
The
No,
one
yeah.
song
He's
everyone's heard
he
of.
sang that with Miley Cyrus's dad, right?
Yep.
Billy Ray
Ray
Cyrus.
Cyrus, yep.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, he's released a new song that I won't get into it a whole lot, but it has some Satan's involved in it, and I think he goes down to hell at one point and does some unspeakable things.
He gives Satan a lap dance
with the devil. Yeah,
Yes.
some very very inappropriate, just weird things. But he's released a set of shoes, a line
Go
of
with the
shoes.
music, yeah.
And they're called Satan shoes. And they contain a drop of human blood in
That's weird.
in each shoe. It's very weird. I think the line is called 666 or something like that. There's some play on 666, the mark of the beast, according to Revelation. They're priced at $1,018, which is a reference to Luke chapter 10, verse 18. And they have, that verse on the side as well, on the side of the shoe. And it reads, "He replied, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." Now, in defense of Nike, these are Nike shoes. In Nike's defense, they've basically said, we have nothing to do with these. This is this guy doing it. But I do find, some issue with this. And I'm not saying it's something the government has to get involved in, anything like this. But whenever people play around with Satan, with demons, with kind of that supernatural, and they're trying to, make light of the devil, for lack of a better term, it disturbs me a little bit. And as a libertarian, I want to say, whenever there are these so-called panics over, let's just call them so-called moral panics, right? Oh, what about the children? This. I tend to view that with skepticism and say, this isn't as big a deal as people are saying. I think this is disturbing, though.
Yeah.
Lil Nas X markets himself, I think, to children. And he's targeting basically this Satan stuff at his fans, and it's just completely godless. It's weird, and it's you're on the wrong side, right? We know that Satan's the wrong side. I don't know why you would want to sort of play around with that stuff. It's just dangerous. I don't get it. What do you guys think, Brian? It looks like you want to say something.
It's not exactly uncommon in kind of modern media, though, right? Like
It's
you look
not.
at, even just in the most broadest sense, the archetype of like an anti-hero.
Yeah.
To be clear, I'm not saying Satan's a hero or an anti-hero or anything like that. But that's the marketing angle, right?
Right.
Like,
It's dark, it's cool
he's
and
the
edgy.
dark
It's
and
edgy.
edgy.
Yeah.
And you see it with and obviously I haven't watched the show, but there's I believe it's a Netflix show, Lucifer.
Yeah.
Where the devil is basically stuck on Earth in human form or something along.
Yeah.
Like I know the general plot line. I've never watched an episode, but you do see stuff like that. for whatever reason, the Lil Nas one does hit a little harder, and I think it is because of what you said. It's a music video, like that's, that's what kids and teenagers are really. Well, I mean, at least when I was a kid. But it does feel a little different. Like again, like Lucifer, it's an adult TV show,
Correct.
As opposed to this music video, which ostensibly any kid with a decent internet connection can find, and
they can find Lucifer too.
Yeah,
but, it's not really marketed toward them. And it's also, I think it's just the pushing the envelope, right? We're not just making a song about Satan. We're putting blood in the shoes. We are, doing the 666 thing. We're taking a Bible verse wildly out of context to make Satan look cool. By the way, that verse does not make Satan look cool. No. It's about how, Satan's not cool at all. I don't know. Yeah.
But he's like,
I mean, I'm going to, at the risk of getting myself in a lot of trouble off camera here, I don't see why this is so important, why this has garnered so much anger on the right. I'm going to take essentially the Joe opinion on this one. We are typically on opposite sides of this, Joe, where I am very worried about this cultural, panic, and Joe is like, it's really not that big of a deal. This one, at the very least, it's the shoes. I don't get why the shoes are at the forefront of this debate. Kristi Noem is out there getting upset about the shoes. A bunch of conservative figures are out there railing against the shoes on Twitter. The shoes are a freaking red herring. They're not there to be the major. The major problem is the fact that we have a video from an artist who, by coming onto the scene with Old Town Road, a meme for children, has marketed his music toward young adults and children. And is got a video with a striptease where he, a gay man, is striptease dancing for the devil. That's a concern. Marilyn Manson was using the pentagram in the early 2000s, late 90s, right? Like these things, these kind of symbolic things don't bother me as much as what's at the heart of the issue, which is stuff like, children seeing the music video. Right. That bothers me.
And that's probably more worrisome.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right.
And not to mention this idea that it shows me, as a Christian, it shows me two things. It shows me that it's very clear now that the culture sees Satan not as a real thing, but as kind of a metaphysical embodiment, a symbol of something. And symbols are easy to kind of manipulate and make something else. And so the left has decided that they're going to kind of take this symbol and they're going to make it a cultural thing that isn't that bad. That's one thing. And another thing is that in Lil Nas X's response to all of the outrage, he essentially said, "Good, I hope you're mad." I don't have the tweet. I should have brought it up. He has a tweet where he says essentially, "Good, I'm glad the conservative Christian right is angry because this is the anger that I felt towards myself growing up gay and in the closet. Because of what they said would happen to me in hell because I was gay." First of all, I've heard a lot of Christian arguments against homosexuality. I've never heard anyone say that gay people are going to be stripping for the devil in hell. That's not an argument I've heard. That's a ridiculous argument. Second of all, it shows me that there is a messaging problem with the Christian right when it comes to the homosexual issue, where we have not been loving toward folks who are homosexual and who are, who we disagree with on the issue of homosexuality. We haven't loved the sinner and hated the sin. We have not done enough to separate those two things out, and we have made them feel as though we hate the sinner.
Yes.
And that's a problem because all of us have plenty of sins we would like
We've made it that gross
in our
sin
closets,
that
right?
are worse than all the sins that we do.
Exactly, and that's not fair.
Correct.
So this gets at a lot of bigger cultural issues for me, and as usual, I think everyone's missing the point, and that makes me about as angry as everyone is about the shoes.
You're right. I can't disagree with anything that you said. That's a very nuanced point. You're right. I feel bad for Lil Nas X, right? Because it sounds like he probably has some issues. Maybe he was maybe people dealt with him the wrong way as a kid that made him do this. I'm not saying, Lil Nas X is this evil, evil man.
No.
That being said, I still think it's disturbing that he put this out.
Of course.
I think that it does speak to a wider issue when it comes to how conservatives and Christians deal with it. I'm not saying this is conservatives' fault. I don't think this music video and this shoes that he put out are conservatives' fault. But it's probably all related to an extent.
They weren't filmed in a vacuum.
That being said, it's still disturbing.
Yes.
It's still not something, if I had kids, that I would want my kids to see. It's not something that I like to see glorified in the culture.
I mean, it is something it is sort of an ongoing cultural issue where, that all stems from just a lack of godlessness. And I'm sure you guys have seen, I wish I had the tweet. I didn't think about it till just now, but there was a study which basically found that less than half of Americans identify with like any religious.
I know that atheism or no religion is on the rise.
It's the postmodern godlessness. Yeah,
and it does make me wonder if part of this sort of reappropriation of Satan is part of that march towards godlessness, where it's like, for people of faith, Satan always represented the ultimate downfall, the ultimate consequence. And it does feel like the left today, culturally, they want to take that away. They don't want you to have to, worry about your faith or repent for your sins, because it's all good. It's all good. Like, maybe Satan's just misunderstood. Like, that's the vibe I get from the sort of the way Satan has been portrayed in media, especially lately. That's the vibe I get, is that is the left very intentionally trying to, unscare children who grew up, man, I don't want to go to hell. Like, I got to behave.
And it's even them saying, look, this isn't real. God isn't real. Satan isn't real. But even in the story that you've made up about God and Satan, Satan's not the bad guy. And exactly. And that's not true.
No.
We know. Yeah.
And I guess to kind of get back at what frustrates me about this whole thing is that that part of it is that we need to get on board with having the conversation we're having right now on a wider scale.
Yes.
Instead of getting upset about shoes on Twitter, where like it's essentially the Kristi Noem versus Lil Nas X tweet thread was literally just them arguing about the shoes.
Yeah, that's useless.
And throwing out uncontextualized Bible verses. What we need to get to a point, and this is kind of, it gets back to the media topic at the beginning of the show. We need to get to a point in our culture where we can have a broader debate, where we actually bring the right issues and the right facts to the table and have a full discussion, instead of just sound bites and headlines and problems. And that's what we do here, which is great.
Yeah. And on that note, if you're interested in more sound bites and open debate, you can catch WJ Live Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. You can catch us on YouTube. You can go to wjlive.com/YouTube. No, youtube.com/WJLive. Sorry. Go ahead and you can go to our YouTube page. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell. That way you get notified every time a new episode goes live. If you're already watching us on YouTube, you can do us another favor. You can check us out at however you like to listen to your podcast, whether it's Spotify, Apple. You can subscribe to WJ Live through your preferred podcast network. Make sure you leave us a 5-star review. That will do us a huge solid. And if you don't want to do any of that, there is another thing you can do that will help us out a lot and let you know when new episodes of WJ Live are live. Please go to westernjournal.com/newsletter. That way you can get, once you go there, you'll be given a bunch of different options. You can pick WJ Live, and that way you will get new episodes emailed directly to you, so you'll know exactly when, where, and how to watch those. And finally, if you would like to support real journalism, one of the best things you can do for us is actually going to westernjournal.com/join. There you can subscribe to us directly. Helps us out a ton. We greatly appreciate it. And before we sign off, just a quick programming note. In observance of Good Friday, this Friday, we will not be having a new episode of WJ Live. So me, Joe, and Andrew will have to suffice until next week, when we will see you guys all again. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Thanks a lot, guys.
Josh, did you hear? They're putting the Libertarian back on the podcast.
No.
Oh? You didn't see the calendar?
No.
You should talk to Kayla about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, who's on the show Tuesday?
You and Joe.
Yeah. Like he's back.
Yeah, no. You and Joe.
The
You should
Libertarian?
Yeah, Libertarian Joe.
He's not back.
You should just go in the studio and check it out.
You're messing with me.
Okay.
Okay. Nice joke, Kayla. Got me to go to the studio. No! No! Oh my gosh!